Mac Power Users, episode 602. Was that a rabbit hole? Welcome back to Mac Power Users. My name is Stephen Hackett. I'm joined as always by my friend and yours, Mr. David Sparks.
Hey, Stephen. How are you today?
I am good, David. How is the West Coast? Hanging in there?
Yeah, we're doing great. We're doing great. I know our friends up in Northern California are dealing with heat and fires. Southern California has been kind of just as it usually is around this time of year.
Good.
So we're all good. And, I don't know. Living life. What else can I say? Now, another feedback show, though, and that's good because I've got some topics that I've been wanting to cover on the show, don't really merit a full show. Microsoft released a really cool product to allow you to run a Windows computer virtually on a Mac, which I think a lot of people are interested in. And we got some coverage on that today and a bunch of good feedback from listeners. This will be a good one.
Yeah, I think so. Before we get into that, we each kind of have some updates. We just wanted to give people about what we're up to.
Yeah. I guess let's start. Both Mac Sparky and 512 Pixels got redesigns.
Yeah.
How did that happen? We didn't talk about it. It's just like
it just happened. Yeah. So you launched yours before I did. I really love what you've done with yours. You've gotten rid of the sidebar, which is really hard to do. So you're in this like beautiful single column layout. It looks really nice.
Squarespace,
Yeah, man.
The occasional sponsor of Mac Power Users.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote them some emails and I wanted to simplify things, and I have heard from all the listeners that love it and hate it, but that's what it is now, and I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, I like it. My site, this redesign has actually been in the works for months. This has been really slow, kind of as I get time to work on it.
Yeah.
Our friend Rosemary Orchard did some work on it. Another friend of mine, William Harding from the internet. He lives in Australia, so we have like 1 hour overlap where we can email each other. where we get it.
Well, you can email anytime, but
if you want a response or if you're talking on like GitHub or something, not a lot of time. And so it too has a redesign. It kept its sidebar, but new navigation was my main thing, and the ability to show subpages in my nav was important to me, and refresh the type, and just kind of a not so much a full redesign as maybe a tune-up, and I'm really happy with it.
Yeah, I really like the typography in the sidebar because it really kind of resonates with me as an old Mac user. I just love the way you did it. And
thank you.
I think it's totally on par and it just looks great. It's like I did the opposite with mine. I was trying to get rid of menu items from the selection. So like if you want to look at the field guides, you don't just get a long list. It goes to a separate page. But it is really, it's fun kind of doing this stuff. And and just seeing how it goes. And, we work so hard on making content for these sites. You want it to look pretty and you want people to enjoy the experience.
Yeah, that's right.
So good job.
Thank you. Yeah, the typeface is actually from Aaron Draplin, who is a graphic designer. Actually, my favorite graphic designer. I have a poster he did on my wall. I've got his book. And you may know his name because he does a lot of the stuff with the field notes. He's sort of partners with Kudal and those folks. So so he had a new typeface available for the web, and so I licensed that, and very happy with the new look.
And I almost hesitate to say this on the show because I know what's going to happen, but I'm still nailing down the body font on my website. It's like I've tried several, and if you pay real close attention to my website, it seems like it changes every 4 or 5 days. But I'm going to get there. I definitely want a sans serif, but I don't know which one yet. And please, I know how you feel about this if you're listening, but don't do it.
It's hard to pick one. I changed mine for the first time, I think, since 512 Pixels has been 512 Pixels. I think it's the first time I've changed the body font in like 10 years or something.
Yeah.
And it feels like a big deal to do.
Yeah. Anyway, a few other things going on as the world opens up a little bit. I am speaking for the first time since all this began and I'm going to be speaking in the end of September in Orlando. It's a great conference put on by some friends of mine that talk about the Mac and technology and the practice of law. So it's called MacTrack Legal. If you go to MacTrackLegal.com, it's September 24th and 25th. There's a bunch of Mac using attorneys and legal professionals there. I'm going to be talking about how I use personal knowledge management and PKM in the practice of law. That's my little bit. My wife played an essential role in me speaking at this. She's like, wait, it's at Disney World? Okay, you should really do it. But yeah, so I'm doing that. And if you're going to be attending, I look forward to seeing you.
Awesome. Yeah. And lastly, but definitely not leastly, I really messed that up.
Yeah, well, it's okay. We'll go.
Yeah, it's almost September. Every September, Relay FM raises money for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. We'll talk a lot more about that once we get kind of into September. But I wanted people to put the date on their calendar. Friday, September 17th. That is going to be the third annual Podcastathon. We're going to be running 12 to 8 p.m. Eastern. So a full 8 hours this time. It'll be the longest one yet. And I don't want to spoil anything, but gang, I am so excited about some of the stuff we have planned for this show this year. So like in previous years, it will be live on Twitch, on the Relay FM Twitch channel. We will post the full thing to YouTube. Usually that takes a couple of days to get the video processed because 8 hours of video takes a long time to process and upload. And then we'll also be releasing the audio on the Departures feed on the Relay website. But watching it live is where it's at. The campaign kind of officially kicks off in September, but if you want to get an early start on a donation, there's a link in the show notes. And St. Jude treats kids from all over the world with cancer and other just terrible situations, and it means that the world to so many families, including my own, that those kids are treated without their parents receiving a bill. Yeah, it's amazing. It's a miracle, and it's a miracle made possible by people around the world like you and I donating to keep it going. And so check that out. We'd love to have you join us for the Podcastathon. It's going to be a wild, wild Friday.
I can't wait.
Let's just say that I have purchased a jacket that is silver and covered in sequins for one segment.
Nice. That is so on brand for you. I'm surprised you didn't already own one.
I didn't already have one. So that's sort of our kind of our updates. We don't get a chance very often to talk about what we're doing, but thought it would be fun to do so today.
Yeah. For more power users today, I am still struggling to vlog and record video. I'm going to have a session with Steven. So we're going to have an intervention again.
I feel a little responsible for this since I told you what gear to get.
Yeah, but anyway, look, just wait. And okay. You are not entirely at fault, but we have issues.
Okay.
Feedback. I got an email from Rhiannon, and I hope I pronounced your name, as she described herself, an 87-year-old granny Mac user since 1985. And as soon as I saw that introductory line, I'm like, she's going to the top of the next feedback. It is not only do I hope I'm still sucking air when I'm 87, I hope I'm still super engaged in Apple technology. And I hope Apple's still around. Who knows, right? But either way, Rhiannon wrote in with some thoughts about how she uses her Mac. She loves stickies. She uses it for her contacts, and she collects a lot of quotes from books. Like when she reads books and she has a quote she likes, she writes it down there. And she is going to buy Apple Silicon. She's just waiting. And she concluded saying she likes our banter, even though we are American, which I thought was pretty great.
But, I'll take it. Thank you.
but she also had a question. She said, look, I have all these quotes. What I want to do is have them float on my screen. I want to have the quotes appear on the screen of my Mac so I can see them as I get through the day. And I thought, well, that's a fun question. And I had a couple ideas for answers. I don't know if you've got any to add in, and listeners, if you do, please add it in at the forums. But the first one I thought would be to do the screensaver. And there used to be a quote screensaver. And when I went to my Mac to check on it, it was gone. I don't know at what point it went away, but Apple took that out. So there's not a built-in quote screensaver, but there is a message screensaver on your Mac. And you can go in there and type in anything you want, including your favorite quote. And then when your Mac goes to sleep, or you hit a keyboard combination or a hot corner to put it to sleep, Rhiannon, you can have that quote floating on your screen. There also used to be an RSS screensaver, which is also not on my, factory Mac. And I guess they took that away too. But I was thinking that'd be cool if there was like a source of quotes that she likes. She could have it subscribe via the RSS and then have different ones show up without her really doing any work. But that was an option that kind of disappeared on me. So then I went looking in the App Store, and there were some really terrible apps. I bought several of them. The one that I would recommend, and it's not great, but it does what she asked for. It's called Desktop Quotes App, and it's just $1. It's 99 cents, so it's not too expensive. And you load it up, and you can type in multiple quotes, or it even has a quote library when you get it, and it puts a quote on your desktop. So this is different from a screensaver, which only appears when you put to sleep. These quotes would be on your desktop the whole day. It doesn't do it very attractively, though. It just kind of takes your existing wallpaper and writes the quote in white on top in the upper left corner, which isn't great, but it does kind of solve the problem she's asking for. But that's as far as I could get, Rhiannon, to answer your question. I don't know, Stephen, you got any ideas on this?
Yeah, I went on a similar hunt when I saw this feedback in the document, and I found basically this application. And then some people in the forum, there was a forum post from a while back, and someone had suggested using Geek Tool, but I think that's probably not the easiest route to go, and I don't even think it's like super up to date anymore. So I would try this app. It seems like this is a little bit of a limited market. The only other thing I sort of thought of was if you've got some like an image editor like Pixelmator or something, and you could basically bring in, like, basically make wallpapers and then have macOS cycle through them, like putting them all in a folder or put them all in a photos album. But that involves making images, which is another step. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a great way to do this.
No, there really isn't. But it is an interesting problem, and thanks for sharing it, Rhiannon. Robert wrote in taking us to task on ScreenFloat. And this one I think was aimed at me because we talked about screen capture recently. And then I think at the end of our discussion, when we went through all the various ways you can screen capture with macOS, I said, also, there's an app called ScreenFloat if you'd like that. And I didn't go into the details. Well, Robert says that's not good enough. To quote him, I find it one of the most useful apps on my machine. I use it the way I suspect most owners do in the short term for short-term memory. When you need to remember something, just take a snapshot with ScreenFloat, and the information floats on your screen until you no longer need it. Wait a second, maybe this could solve the quote problem.
There you go.
Anyway, like he does it with error messages that shows up with some program he's writing, the price of a room in motels. And the thing about ScreenFloat is it stays on top. It floats above. And I didn't say that's like the killer feature of the application. Or he says he even uses it for random junk that he needs to have saved. And he says, I love the app so much I have trouble being placed on the heap of boring screen capture utilities. Well, thank you, Robert. We have given ScreenFloat the attention it deserves on Mac Power users.
That's right.
And I would agree with him. The reason that was the only one I mentioned as a third-party one, because I think it's the best third-party one. And if you find that the screen capture tools you get with macOS aren't enough for you, ScreenFloat is probably where you should land.
Yeah, I like this feature that whatever you captured is in your vision until you need to get rid of it. Right? We've all been in a situation where you have a web window and you slam it way up in the upper right-hand corner so you can just see the paragraph of text you need. Or you're copying and pasting something you don't really need, but so you stick it in a sticky or an Apple Note or something. This sort of gets around all of those little hacks that most of us do. I think it's pretty clever.
Yeah, GW wrote in, and his question is, what is open source? He's like, you guys talk about open source, but I don't really understand it. It seems if it's open to me, it seems that it's unsafe. I was going to download LibreOffice for my Mac. A lot like this software. I use Windows at work, and I really do like working with across the Access database that I create. I wish FileMaker was still being made by Apple. That was such a nice database program. But what about open source? And I think we do throw the term around without really ever explaining it. So maybe we should go deep on open source.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a complicated subject, and different people have different feelings. So I'm going to try to kind of cover, I think, both extremes as far as the opinions on it. I will say FileMaker is still around. Bento is gone, though, which was like an iWork kind of style
I think that's
database.
what he was referring to.
Man, Bento was cool.
Yeah.
It makes me sad that it's gone, and there's really nothing that ever kind of took its place in my mind. So the basic definition of open source software, and it can be a full application or a suite of applications like this LibreOffice, or it can be something as simple as like a little utility, or if you use Alfred and you download plugins, a lot of those are open source. So what open source means is that its code base is hosted online where people can see it. Maybe the most famous example right now in the Mac world is NetNewsWire. Brent Simmons and his team have made that open source, and they let people see the code. You can see, if you understand what you're looking at, which I don't, I'm not a developer, but they can see what the code base contains and what it's doing. Past that, what quote open source means is a pretty wide field. So some projects are open source, but are still developed by one or two people. So maybe it's like that Alfred plugin that, you downloaded that does this clever thing. Maybe only one or two people work on that, but you could download the code you want and tinker with it, or, adapt it into your own, that sort of thing. Other open source projects, like parts of Linux, LibreOffice, I think, is this way. NetNewsWire is this way. It may have larger teams of collaborators, and usually you have a group of people or a single person who's kind of in charge, who has the vision, who has the final yes or no about features or what bugs to fix in what order, that sort of thing. But you have multiple developers working on this project, usually in their spare time. And what these two kind of extremes allow is for other people to see what's going on and potentially contribute to it. Some people fear that open source applications are not as secure as something written by a private developer or team. I think the thought here is, well, if the code is publicly available, then maybe it's easier to find a way you could exploit it and make it not as secure. And then on the other end, you have fear that closed source software, so something like, I'm kind of looking at my Mac, something like Craft.
Pages.
Yeah, Pages, yeah. a software application written by a team or a company or even an individual where the code base is not public. Other people fear that isn't as secure because the public can't walk in and they can't, quote, audit the code for security issues. As with all things, the middle ground is probably the right place to be. And there's open source software that I use, and there's, for some things, and for other things I don't. And it's a matter of finding what works for you and your needs. So if I download an Alfred plugin off, GitHub, and I could see all the code, like, that doesn't concern me. Even running something like LibreOffice, which is really big and well known, especially in the Linux community. Yeah, it's probably just fine to run. But you just need to go in with your eyes open that it is a different style of software development than something like Finder or Pages or Microsoft Word or something like that is built by a team or a company, not necessarily out in the open. Now, Apple itself is in the open source community. So Swift, the Swift programming language, is open source in the sense that Apple controls it, but they have this community of people around it commenting and suggesting fixes. The kernel of Mac OS X used to be open source. The Darwin kernel and a lot of low-level Mac stuff was open source in the early days. Apple has really pulled back from that over the years on the system software side. So even Apple has been in this world.
Yeah, and one thing I would want to address is that you should not be afraid of it with open source. I think a lot of people are afraid, well, if it's open source, then anybody can go in and inject code, and then, bad actors are going to put something malicious in LibreOffice. And it doesn't work that way. If you want to make changes to LibreOffice, it goes through a filter, and a lot of smart people look at it before it actually gets included in the build. And so I wouldn't worry about that. To answer GW's specific question, I've used LibreOffice in the past. I think a lot of people do. I think you're probably fine with LibreOffice. But it is open source can mean many things, and a lot of times open source also means components of software, like a building block of software, like the stuff with Swift programming language that Stephen was talking about. And when you get down to it, a lot of software includes some component of open source, even though it's sold commercially. So,
hopefully that's helpful.
It's everywhere, but I mean, when you look at a declared open source project like LibreOffice, I think if it's a big project, I think you're probably fine. And good luck.
Yeah.
I hope it works for you. I mean, the question with LibreOffice always is, in addition to being open source, is it like an app that you want to use, and does it have the features you want, and is the user interface acceptable to you, and things like that. So
sure,
it's a whole different question. Okay, similar question we got in from Mike saying, David, what is end-to-end encryption? We've been talking about it lately, and this actually came up on the forums. I was talking about how I use end-to-end encryption with my Obsidian installation, and then I think a lot of people don't really know what that means. What is end-to-end encryption? And so I'm going to try to address it as best as I can. I'm not a security expert, and you don't need to email me if you are. Write a blog post and send it to us if you want to explain it better. But there's different types of encryption with your data. Two of the major categories are your data when it's in motion or in transit, or when it's at rest. And because so much of the stuff we do these days gets up on internet servers, you want to look at, is the data encrypted while it's moving, because that's one of the key places things get intercepted. Like when you go to the Starbucks and you use the public Wi-Fi, that's where they sniff out the traffic. When you send your email credentials to your email provider, if they capture that, then they get your email and all sorts of problems, and that's data in transit. But then you've also got the issue of your data at rest, when you put it on a server, like the iCloud servers. The data you put on an iCloud server largely is not end-to-end encrypted. There are exceptions like messages, but when you store data on iCloud, it's there. That's why Apple, when it gets a subpoena from the government, has to turn over all the iCloud data on the people they get subpoenaed for. So that is not end-to-end encrypted. So the question for end-to-end encryption is, can you encrypt it from the moment it leaves your computer to the moment it arrives at a destination? And that's usually thought about in terms of communications. And historically, that has not been something large tech companies do. That'd be something that the NSA and the government does. But for consumer data storage and cloud services, end-to-end has not been really an option. But it's starting to show up. And one of the best examples is the Messages app on Apple, where they encrypt it both in transit, at rest, and then at the other end. And one of the nice things about Messages is that I don't think they really need to store a lot. They're just delivering a message. So they've been able to encrypt your Messages traffic in a way that it is encrypted from the moment it leaves your device to the moment it arrives at the other. Like this week, I was giving Stephen advice on more stuff to buy for his desk, and that was a very secure communication.
That's right.
So that's great that's starting to come. I, in general, am a fan of protecting people's privacy, and I understand there are really good reasons for exceptions on that. And in fact, this week in the news, Apple has the CSAM thing, and I don't have my arms around it enough yet to really talk about it on the show. So we're going to pass on that today. But there are good reasons for exceptions, but in general, privacy equals good. Data storage services like iCloud largely are not end-to-end encrypted. And there's a lot of reasons for this. I mean, some companies need to access the data on the servers in order to give you better services. Like, kind of Google's famous for being really good at scrubbing server data and returning services to the user. And that's why when you type in Stormtrooper on your Google Docs or Google Photos files, it'll find a picture of a Stormtrooper because it can look at all your images and figure it out for you. And a lot of people like those additional services. So the first question is, do people even want end-to-end encryption for all their data? Because they may want the services that they get from having things on a server. And also there's just, government regulation concerns. Like, can you comply with government regulation while locking yourself out of your user data, where you can, when they subpoena, you can say, I'm sorry, I don't have the ability to see it because we built encryption so good into the system that we don't even have the ability to look at our user data.
Yeah. Because they don't have the key to decrypt it. And and so, in that situation, say that it's Apple would say, well, we just have this blob of data and we know nothing about it, nothing what's in it, because it's completely encrypted and the keys are not with us. And obviously, from a privacy perspective, that's what you want.
But there's other problems. There's a convenience problem. I mean, there's a lot of people that are pretty lackadaisical about retaining their passwords. They don't listen to us and use Apple's password service or 1Password or whatever. And they lose access to their own devices, and they're counting on Apple being able to reset the device for them and get them their iCloud data back. And with an end-to-end encryption situation, Apple would say, I'm sorry, all your photos are gone. And that's a problem too. So it's like there's all these competing interests, and I don't know where this all ends up. I think Apple is headed towards making iCloud at least offered as an end-to-end encryption storage, because Apple, of all the big tech companies, seems to be the one that's most serious about user privacy. And I think they look at it as a selling point, but I also think they kind of take it from a moral standpoint. They really don't want to be, they really want their users to have privacy. And so I think that may be coming down the road. I think that may be one of the reasons why they made these recent moves with CSAM, is they're finding ways to deal with the edge cases before they announce a end-to-end encryption solution for iCloud. But that's just me guessing. I don't have any information on that. Where do we use end-to-end encryption? I use it in Obsidian. The reason is they built an end-to-end encryption solution into their software. The developers of Obsidian are pretty clever about this stuff, and they have their own syncing platform. So I don't need to use Dropbox or iCloud. I can use it theirs. And the way it is, I build my own key, and that way they can't see my data on their server. And that's the reason, one of the main reasons, not the only reason, but one of the main reasons why Obsidian stood out to me in comparison to apps like Craft and Roam Research, because they didn't have that kind of solution. And I want to take notes on stuff I'm doing for clients, and I'd prefer that be end-to-end encrypted.
Yeah. I use it in Day One. And it's the same type deal where you can basically create your key, and if you lose that encryption key, you need some sort of basically you got to save the key. If the key is lost, your data is gone because it's a private key. You don't hand that over to Day One or to Obsidian. It's up to you to keep that safe. And it's something like iCloud or with messages. The keys are kind of generated automatically by your device itself, and it's set up a little bit differently. But a lot of these applications that offer it now, you've got to keep the key yourself, which is usually just like a string of numbers and digits, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and we for instance, Day One got purchased by Automatic in the last few months.
Yeah.
And a lot of people got worried, and people wrote me saying, well, should I trust them anymore? I'm like, if you have end-to-end encryption on, you don't have to trust them, because Doesn't matter if Automatic bought them or whoever bought them, they're not going to get the data because you have the key. And so Day One is another great example. DevonThink is also another example where you can write in your own security key, and that encrypts it through DevonThink before it goes up to the cloud. You're still putting it in iCloud or Dropbox, but it is encrypted data there. So if someone gets it, I think they're going to have a real hard time figuring out what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
so there are options out there for end-to-end encryption. I think it's starting to become a thing available to consumers. I hope that, the industry trends this direction. But I think right now we're at a time in history where it's not clear. Honestly, I think there are going to be, governmental regulation is waking up to Silicon Valley, and maybe they're going to not like that idea and prohibit it, or maybe they will. Who knows? And there's all these different countries that have different priorities. But what I would recommend when you're doing stuff that has sensitive data, like my example of Obsidian, if there is end-to-end encryption, I would recommend you use it.
So a little bit more listener feedback. We were talking about home networking and small office networking several weeks ago, and we heard from listener Chip in regards to the asymmetric speeds a lot of people get. So I have 1,000 megabytes down, but only 60 up. Well, listener Chip lives in Asheville, North Carolina, which is, by the way, is like one of the most beautiful places in the South. Asheville is amazing. They also have a really nice zoo. He gets 6 megabits per second down and 300 kilobits up.
Yeah.
So everyone pray for listener Chip.
Yeah, I know. I was
sorry,
thinking
Chip.
about it. Yeah, Chip. I don't know what to tell you. I guess that's the cost of living in someplace so beautiful. It's like,
it's great. Right in the mountains.
Yeah,
I love Asheville.
All right. I feel dumb. We talked about settings, and I said, I don't know who would turn on the thing where it announces the time every hour. That seems dumb. And then, of course, a sight impaired listener wrote me and said, well, Dave, I can't see the menu bar, so it actually helps me.
Yeah, no, that's on both of us, because I sat here and listened to you say it, and I said to myself, there's got to be a reason it does it. And then I saw this email as well, and I felt like an idiot. So our apologies.
So I'm sorry. But either way, there are good reasons for these things to be included. In fact, this listener has, and I apologize, I copied the text and I didn't get your name into the plan document. He said he's going to blog and how he's using AppleScript to give himself time cues and things all throughout the day.
Oh, cool.
Please email me when you do that. I will link it at MacSparky. We'll make sure that the word gets out when you put that post up.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. I actually have a little AppleScript story real quick.
All right.
I had a bunch of HTML documents that I needed to bring into DevonThink. I sort of found this new repository of Apple history stuff, but the file names for the HTML documents were just like 001, 002. The website they had been on originally didn't use sort of linguistic naming for their files.
Sure.
I thought, well, I can just put it all in a folder and tell AppleScript to pull the page title out of the HTML and like rename the files. And I was having a little trouble with it. And then I remember that DevonThink just has a feature, and it's rename file based on web page title. And so I just imported them onto DevonThink and told DevonThink to do it. But I was in the script editor, baby, and I was close, but then I bailed.
But anytime you can find an easier solution for that stuff like that, Hazel and DevonThink are two apps that are brilliant at stuff like that.
I was reminded how talkative AppleScript is. You just tell it in English words, like tell quote Safari quote. It's like it's so weird compared to more modern things.
Yeah, but I mean the idea of it was that anybody should be able to do it, and and if you can figure it out, like I recommend every time this subject comes up. Sal Segoyan, who comes on our show occasionally, he wrote a book called AppleScript 123, and I would recommend going through that book. You'd be surprised what you can do with AppleScript, and it's never going to get to the iPhone and iPad. I've kind of lost hope in that, but if you work a lot on a Mac, I think we're good now. Now that they've announced shortcuts for Mac and included AppleScript support, I think we're good. And I think I said on this show, I feel like you need Dynamite to get AppleScript out of the Mac OS.
Mm-hmm.
And even if Apple wanted to pull it out, I don't think they'd want to spend the time and money to do that. So AppleScript is still a valid thing if you want to like do special scripting. Like recently I did some scripting of Apple Mail, and there's just nothing better than AppleScript for that, because I wanted to get the first name of the recipient, and I wanted to get the email and the subject line and yank all that out and turn it into tasks. It was like a complicated thing for the law practice. And Apple, I don't know of any way scripting wise easier than that, because AppleScript has the dictionary for mail, and AppleScript is really robust, and it kind of makes doing that stuff easy. One other thing on AppleScript related to kind of like speaking out loud is the say command. All you have to do is say, and then put something in quotes.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime my family is, being nice and quiet and I want to disrupt, I open the script editor and I just have my computer start talking out loud like it's another person in the room, like it's a separate entity. And it gets them super annoyed super fast. But you just say whatever, Say, those mashed potatoes were particularly good, but I'm not allowed to eat them because I'm a computer, or something like that.
Right.
And I guess it's a dad joke thing, but
it is.
It brings me no end of joy.
Oh, no. I used to do it to my college roommate because I had a Power Mac G3, like the blue and white, under my desk, and I had it set up with some speakers. And so I would just occasionally, from my laptop, remote into it and make it talk. And then one day he got tired, just went over there and unplugged it. So I learned my lesson about pranking people with the say command.
It'd be fun if you did it when you're not in the room. Like, have it just randomly say at 10 p.m., why are you doing that? Just let it run, with your roommate. Oh, boy.
This episode of MPU is made possible by 1Password. Go to 1Password.com/MPU to sign up for a free 30-day trial with 20% off once you purchase. We live in a complicated age. We all have countless online accounts, social media, banking, everything in between. And each one needs its own secure, unique password to keep us safe. That's where 1Password comes in. You can use it to create strong, unique passwords, and the best part is you don't have to remember them. They're all stored in 1Password, synced to all of your devices. So if you're at home, in the office, or on the go, you can log in with all of your accounts easily. With 1Password for families, you can share login information with the important people in your life. And with 1Password for teams, you can create 1Password vaults for different coworkers, managing access to critical information with fine-grained control. 1Password works across a wide range of browsers and basically any operating system you're going to come in contact with. AgileBit stays on top of the newest features, meaning that 1Password on iOS uses Face ID, and you can use Touch ID if your Mac supports that as well. It's absolutely fantastic. Even on my Mac Pro, with no Touch ID, no Face ID, I can use my Apple Watch to unlock 1Password. It's fantastic. So head on over to 1Password.com/MPU to learn more and to sign up for a free 30-day trial. When you sign up, you'll get 20% off. Once again, that's 1Password.com/MPU. So David, you mentioned at the top this new Microsoft offering product, and it's basically letting you use like Windows kind of remotely. And I think this is really interesting for people who may not need Windows very often, or maybe they're like on an iPad or on a M1 Mac and running Windows is tricky. So tell me about this this Windows 365.
Yeah. So there's an emerging problem. I mean, historically, to run Windows on your Mac was not that difficult. You could just install Boot Camp or get like Parallels or one of the third-party products, and you could have your computer alternatively boot straight into Windows, or you could run it at the same time. But with the transition to the M1 Mac and the Apple Silicon, because when our Macs are going to no longer be running Intel chips, that solution of running Windows so easily is going away. Now, there's an argument to be made that that's temporary, because as the success of the Apple Silicon hits the world and people, I mean, we're hearing from new listeners who were Windows users up until 6 months ago, and they got a 20-hour laptop with an M1 MacBook, and now they're all in with Mac. So there's transitions going on with people switching over because it's just so far superior to Intel that now Microsoft is upping its game with the with the alternative versions of Windows that they're making for alternative chipsets, including they're trying to make, well, they have ARM Windows, and my understanding is that they're really turning up the gas on that. So there could be a day in the not so distant future where we run ARM Windows on a Mac. In fact, if you look at YouTube and the web, people are already figuring out how to do it, but it's not really kind of like blessed yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with all that in mind, that may be an easy way. Or another thing you could do is, spend $1,000, buy a Windows laptop and put it in the corner. That the problem that a lot of people have for this is that they need to run an accounting program or some sort of engineering calculation program or something that's industry specific, or they need for their business that just doesn't exist on Mac. And historically, they've had this really easy solution, and now that's going away with the arrival of the M1. The other problem is gaming, which this isn't really meant to address. But so in addition to these solutions that exist or seem to be emerging, Microsoft announced Windows 365 about a month ago, and I wrote them and asked if I could have a trial account because I feel like there'll be a lot of listeners of Mac Power users that may be interested in this product. And what it is they set up a Windows computer for you in the cloud, and it's really a segment on a server. It's not like a beige box, somewhere in Cupertino, right? But it's effectively the same thing. And if you subscribe to this service, you can, through either the web or through Microsoft's remote desktop software, set up your own virtual Windows computer. And then your Mac becomes kind of like a dumb terminal that plugs into it. So I did that, and I've been running it for a few weeks now, and I thought I'd kind of share some thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about this. This is a sort of a common setup in business, not necessarily having the virtual PC in the cloud like this is, but you have terminals maybe like in a doctor's office, and they all sort of go back to one server. They're all instances just on the server. And in that situation, that's great because that thin client in the patient room, it doesn't have to be updated very often. It can, if it's damaged or lost, you don't lose any data. And this is kind of that idea, but on steroids.
Yeah. And listeners that are professional IT people are rolling their eyes because this has been going on for years, and there have been other companies offering services like this, like Shadow, which I'll talk about in a minute. But Microsoft is now officially in the game, and they've and they've had things like this in the past, but this is really something that I think would be of interest to our listeners that have that accounting or engineering software or something they need to occasionally run. I was thinking about it in terms of my law practice when I used to do more trial work. There was an excellent application, a relational database app that trial lawyers use, and it's just never come over to Mac. And I thought, well, this would be a way to run that. So to set up, all you do is you get an account, and it's really kind of business friendly. Usually you do it through an enterprise account, but they're kind of figuring that out as they go along. But once you get an account, you have an account email and a password, and you go to a website and you log in, and you've got a Windows computer in your browser. If you download Microsoft's free remote desktop app from the Mac App Store or the iOS App Store, it's the same thing. You put in your account email and your password, and you've got a PC running right there. And the setup, there's nothing easier. I've set up the, various PC on Mac situations over the years. When you set up Parallels, I like Parallels because you can run at the same time. But one thing I always didn't like is that it seemed to come into your system. It was more invasive than I wanted. Like I would go to open a JPEG and it'd say, well, do you want to open this in preview or do you want to open it in Windows? Well, I never want to open it in Windows, and you would have to deal with that kind of stuff. Or With Boot Camp, you were literally making a separate partition and giving
Yeah.
up hard drive space, which
It was like 2 computers in one.
yeah, and with SSDs being what they are and how expensive they are, sometimes giving up all that extra space for, running one accounting program seemed kind of ridiculous. And this eliminates all of that. You're basically logging into another computer. The one I had, the one they gave me access to had, I believe, 8 GB of RAM and 128 GB SSD attached to it, and it was fine. I mean, I ran multiple applications on it. I wrote a review on it for MacSparky. I wrote it in Notepad on Windows, just virtually through remote desktop app on my Mac, and it's fine. It's very responsive. I do think my recent upgrade of Wi-Fi and networking gear helps, because a fast internet connection is critical here. But with my really fast internet, um, I thought it was great. I mean, when I was typing in Notepad, it didn't feel like I was typing on a computer at the other end of the internet. It felt like I was just typing on my computer.
That's impressive. I mean, especially with something like typing.
Yeah.
Any sort of delay over the network, you're gonna actually feel it, right? Like you're pressing keys and there's a beat before they show up.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't write an article that way. You'd lose your mind.
Yeah. Now, if I lived in Asheville, North Carolina, I'm not sure the experience would have been as good.
No.
But here in SoCal, it was fine. And the apps I ran on it all worked just fine. I mean, I could go in the Edge browser in Windows and download software and run it. I tried several applications. I went on YouTube and streamed 4K video, and that's where I hit stutter. Like, 4K video on YouTube on a virtual computer, then streamed over the internet to my house, was stuttering. It wasn't butter smooth like it would be on my own, Safari installation on my local Mac. And I have a feeling that if I was, had a Windows install, it would have looked better, right? It is definitely not down for gaming, that machine, but it depends on which machine you get, right? They have ranges and prices. The one that they let me borrow was at the $41 tier with 8 GB. For 4 GB, it would have been $31 per month. But they have them ranging from $20 a month up to like $160 a month. So I guess you could spec it up enough to be a gaming PC, but I think if you wanted a gaming PC, I don't think this is the answer for you.
No, I think the lag would.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's a big deal in typing, and you look at Stadia, and there's a bunch of different game streaming services, and they all sort of let people down compared to local gaming.
Yeah. And I asked on the forums if anybody has questions about this, and Bob Spivak, who's one of our HomeKit experts, he's even come on the show. He gave me a whole list. So I'm going to answer his questions. How is it about sorting mouse, trackpad, and all that stuff? And it's all fine. It works just fine. I didn't have to install any drivers or anything. It all just worked. Pencil with the iPad Pro worked as well. And I didn't really dwell on that, but you can run this Windows install on your iPad, no problem. Just download the remote Microsoft remote software, put your stuff in there. If you've got a keyboard attached, you're typing on it just like you'd be typing on it if you were on your Mac. So that's kind of cool. The display looked fine. The visibility was fine. The graphics intensive work, it's not up to it. I mean, this is, like I said, if you need to run a special accounting program or something like that, you're good. If you're going to be editing video, this is not the answer for you. Password and login support was fine, although Microsoft wanted to capture all my passwords with their system, and I didn't want to give it to them. It was on this loaner system, but I could install 1Password on it. I mean, 1Password for Windows exists, and that works fine. The connectivity was super easy. You literally just open the app and it starts going. It didn't, there's a bit of a handshake, but it didn't take that long. And I just think overall, my takeaway from this stuff is it's kind of expensive. If you think about it, with $30 a month over 12 months is $360 a year. But that's cheaper than buying a PC. You don't really have to maintain it. You don't have to add a bunch of stuff to your Mac. I think if you're one of those folks out there on M1 that needs a Windows solution, this is at least worth looking into. Maybe just buy it for a month and give it a try and see how it works for you. I think because so much of it is dependent on your own internet connection, maybe it's not fast enough for you wherever you're at, whatever your situation is. But the lack of hassle makes it, I think, the price about right.
Yeah, and it's another option if you need Windows from various places, and the the ability to run it from an iPad is really interesting.
Yeah.
And as like the Windows 11 ARM stuff, that's not all done yet, and time will tell how that works out. I think they are making progress, but Microsoft has had a lot of trouble getting applications running on ARM versions of Windows. It has not been nearly as smooth for them as it has been for Apple. And so, especially if you have some sort of legacy Windows software, this may totally be the way to go.
Yeah, I mean it's super easy to set up, and that's where Microsoft really nails it. But it also kind of sent me down the rabbit hole of what are the other services doing this stuff. And one of the ones I discovered is that a lot of people would seem to like is called Shadow, and that one is more aimed at gamers, and that's $30 a month. So I bought a month of it just to see, in comparison, and it was about the same speed as the Microsoft one. I think I just, I couldn't really find any noticeable difference for the business stuff, except you don't really have Microsoft behind it. I don't know how secure it is. Like, I'm not sure I'd put any client data on something from this company called Shadow, but it really is made for gaming. And I used to play a game, Star Wars, the Old Republic, before, the end of times. I used to have this game I played, and I would run it through Boot Camp on a Mac. But, when everything got crazy, I just shut all that stuff down. I'm too busy taking care of the family and writing field guides and stuff now to play with that. But they have the game. My data was still in the game because the way that it works, you could go resume your subscription if you wanted. So I went and loaded it up through a Shadow server and played it over the internet. And I was surprised at how good it looked. But that's not something you could do with the Microsoft offering. But I really feel like Shadow to me is more something that I would do with gaming than I would do with like actual work. So, but there's several options out there, but it is pretty cool to think about the fact that you can push a couple buttons on your Mac and spin up a PC somewhere in the world and just have it as your PC.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. That feels real futuristic in a way.
Yeah, it does. It does.
The idea of, I guess, like thin client computing, it comes back every 15 years, right?
Yeah, I know. Well, that was the original dream, right? With the big servers and cheap workstations and. I don't know. But then you look at the thing that goes in your pocket, and that's a really powerful computer. That's not a thin client.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, thank you, Microsoft, for letting me try it out. I think that I will not be subscribing to it because I don't have any Windows programs I need to run. But if I did, this would probably be the solution I'd be using, at least until Windows for ARM gets a little further down the road.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thanks for checking that out for us. That is, it caught my interest immediately when I saw the headlines about it. So I'm glad you were able to spend some time with it.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by SetApp. More than 200 powerful apps for your Mac. And if you go to the link in the show notes, you can try it free for a week. Getting things done is a challenge that everyone struggles with. One of the ways to tackle it is to make sure you have the right tools. And for your computer, that means having the right apps. SetApp is on a mission to help users get more done. With SetApp, there is no more worrying about having to search for apps to solve a problem. SetApp packs over 200 apps for your Mac and iPhone into one. That's an app for almost any task, so you can stay in your flow and finish what you started. This lets you think about your tasks and not apps. I signed up for SetApp when they first started the service, and I've been a loyal subscriber ever since. When I set up a new Mac, one of the first things I do is load up SetApp and start downloading so many applications. Right now on my Mac I'm recording, I've got Bartender, Dropzone, Default Folder, Clean My Mac, MindNode, Mockup Studio, PDF Squeezer, Better Touch Tool, Pathfinder, iStat menus, Hazeover, App Timer, and Jump Desktop. And that's the Mac that I just record podcasts on. It's not the Mac that I do the most work on. SetApp is awesome because it gives you access to all these applications for one set fee. And not only is it more convenient, it's also a great value because instead of paying hundreds or even thousands of dollars for separate licenses, there's just one monthly flat fee. New apps are added to SetApp regularly. Updates are free, and all the apps are full-featured pro versions. So head over to setapp.com to try SetApp free for a week. If you like it, pay just $9.99 per month. That's setapp.com. And we've got a link in the show notes that we'd appreciate that you follow. It'll get you that free week of trial and let them know you came from the Mac Power users. Our thanks to SetApp for their support of the Mac Power users and all of Relay FM.
So it is towards the end of August now, really. So the beta process for iOS 15, iPadOS 15, macOS Monterey, watchOS 8. Is it 8 this year? I don't ever run the watchOS betas, but we've been in this time for quite a while now, really nearing the end of it. I mean, we can kind of assume that we'll see the public versions of at least some of this stuff maybe as soon as a month from now. And I wanted to see how it's going for you.
Yeah, I am still fully, invested in the betas. I have it on my phone, my iPad, the one Mac, and my watch. So I've gone all the way in. Where have you got it installed at this point?
I've got it on my phone and iPad, and I have it on my laptop. So I am using them quite a bit, and I definitely want to hear about your experience, but mine, at least in the last several weeks, has been really pretty calm, pretty quiet.
Yeah, the stability is improving. One of the issues I had was the shortcuts for Mac was pretty busted with the original betas, and now suddenly a bunch of pieces are starting to work together, which is good. I was getting worried about it, but I've got shortcuts now that weren't running a few weeks ago. And it's always going to suck a lot of battery life when you're going through the beta process. I think that, there's a lot of reporting and things going on in beta that they turn off before they release it to the public. So the battery life is still bad, but the stability has been just fine for me.
Yeah, same. Shortcuts was definitely, in my mind, almost the outlier this year. Like, it was by far the most broken thing I came up against, and it's not surprising. It's a brand new app, and they're bringing a lot of technologies over, and so I don't think that's going to be a long-term thing with shortcuts on the Mac. In fact, honestly, the more I use it, the more excited I am. The shortcuts is going to be everywhere and be available to us, on each of our devices. And, all in all, like, yeah, on my production machine, I'm going to hold off on Monterey just because, this computer goes sideways. I got a big problem. But I think for people just kind of out there in the world, knock on wood, I think it's going to be a fairly smooth upgrade process this year. I think particularly on the Mac, and that's a good thing because we've had a couple of, we did a whole episode about, hey, Catalina's going to destroy your 32-bit apps, right? It's been a very rocky couple of years in terms of what these upgrades bring. You had the new UI, which people had to contend with. And so I kind of feel like the Mac is heading towards maybe smoother waters, at least on the OS front. And that's good.
Yeah, well, I do think that this year we're starting to see the payoff of the pain of the last few years, with the way they've unified the, Swift UI and a lot of these other things they're doing. They make it possible to release features for all three platforms at the same time, whereas in years past, that just so rarely happened. And we're going to do a show on it when it releases, and we're going to cover it in bigger detail. But I did want to just kind of check in on some of the features to see if you're using them and what your experience is thus far. Focus mode is by far my favorite new feature, and I am using the heck out of it. We'll get into all the details of what I'm doing with it, because the fact that this one primary Mac I have doesn't have focus mode on it kind of is the fly in the ointment right now. But I love the ability to pick an area of focus and then like shut out all other notifications. And it's really, really powerful.
Yeah, so I think that's something that we will probably come back to once it's available to everybody. But it sounds like in the beta, at least, you've already kind of leaned into this new functionality and are really relying on it.
Yeah, I am, and I'm looking forward to it. Apple Mail, they have this new plugin architecture, and the initial feedback I'm getting from a lot of independent developers is it's not powerful enough and they can't do enough with it. And I don't know what's going to happen with Apple Mail when it comes out, but that's something that's on my radar right now. Getting back around to shortcuts, now that it's starting to work better and I'm using it more, there's some really great stuff with it. I am going to do a shortcuts for Mac field guide. It's going to be a separate title. So I'm already kind of deep in that right now. And I'm, starting to discover where the good parts and the bad parts are. And Shortcuts is really good for scripting a bunch of stuff on your Mac that historically has been difficult, like contacts and some of the user data that, third-party automation software just doesn't get access to. So I think it's going to be an excellent tool for a lot of things that were hard before. I don't think it's going to replace AppleScript and Keyboard Maestro and Hazel and all the other stuff because those tools do other things that Shortcuts just doesn't even bother with. And I look at it as going to be like one more tool in the tool belt. So we're going to have a wrench and a screwdriver and a hammer, and it's going to be awesome.
Mm-hmm. And whatever Automator is, a rusty shovel.
Well, that part is not true. I feel like this is absolutely going to replace Automator.
Oh yeah.
The only thing, and they've even said that, but the only problem is they haven't moved all of the Automator actions over. Like one of my Automator scripts that I wrote a long time ago that I use almost every day is it inserts a watermark draft symbol behind a PDF document, and they haven't got that action sent over to Shortcuts yet. So I still have to run that through Automator, but all they have to do is put that one action in Shortcuts, and then I don't need that anymore. And I feel like probably over the next year or two, they've got a checklist somewhere and they're just going to knock all that stuff out.
Yeah, I fully expect it's a multi-year thing. Maybe next year we get the rest of those actions and they say, hey, it's deprecated. And then, the year or two after that, it goes away completely.
I do wish they would follow some leads from some of the other services. Like one of them that seems like a no-brainer to me would be for Shortcuts to be able to script menu bar triggers. Like you could say, go in the Finder app and click on, file, new Finder window, which is something you can do easily with Keyboard Maestro and AppleScript. And that's just not there. But I mean, that is an automation shortcut that a lot of people I think would like to use because it's just a really easy way to trigger automations that when it's not written for the app already. And, accessing the menu bar shouldn't be that difficult. But anyway, so I've got a couple things I'd like to see them add to it. But overall, I think it's, it's on mission. It's made to be a simple, easy to use shortcut or automation tool. And it's that. And I'm already daily using several shortcuts on my Mac on my Monterey machines.
This episode of Mac Power Users is made possible by our friends over at Squarespace. If you've got a website to build, maybe you're working on your online presence or running a business, you should start with Squarespace because they have you covered with everything from websites to online stores to marketing tools and analytics. Squarespace combines cutting-edge design and world-class engineering, making it easier than ever to establish your home online and make your ideas a reality. You start with a professionally designed template and use drag and drop tools to make it your own. You can customize the look and feel, the settings, the products you have on sale, and more with just a few clicks. And all Squarespace websites are optimized for mobile, so your content automatically adjusts so it looks great on any device. You also get free unlimited hosting, top-of-the-line security, and dependable resources to help you succeed. There's nothing to patch or upgrade. They have award-winning 24/7 customer support. Plus, they have tools to let you easily grab unique domain name, tune your SEO, and even handle your email marketing to help get your ideas out there. Squarespace is a fantastic place to start. I've set up a bunch of sites for people over the years, and it's great. You can just bring in content from your desktop. Again, those drag and drop tools make it really easy to lay out a page, change the formatting, change the styling, and then save it and go back to your day. So head on over to squarespace.com/MPU for a free trial with no credit card required. And when you're ready to launch, use the offer code MPU to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain name. That's squarespace.com/MPU. And when you decide to sign up, use the offer code MPU to get 10% off your first purchase and to show your support for the show. Our thanks to Squarespace for their support of Mac Power users.
Steven, what are you playing with lately?
I've been very busy, mostly playing with like tools and nailing foam to walls. But in terms of software, we'll talk about software first. We've mentioned this application before. MimeStream is a new Gmail specifically, Gmail client for Mac OS. It's written by this person who was at Apple, and it only works with Gmail, but it uses all of Gmail's like kind of oddball features that kind of go beyond regular IMAP. Super fast, really lightweight, looks really nice. And I have been checking in on it every couple of months. The thing that kept me from using it full time was a lack of printing. You know, it was early kind of open beta and just printing hadn't been added. And I opened it the other day and turns out printing is now there. And so now I can, a lot of what I've got to do with mail at doing Relay administration in particular is creating PDFs of messages that have receipts in them and then, you know, attaching those to expenses in our invoicing and, you know, as sort of our financial software. And so can't do that if I can't make a PDF or if I can't print it and make a PDF from there. And so that's been added. And so it's been my main mail application now for a couple of weeks. And there are definitely some things that are different than mail that I don't like quite as much. But overall, it's a great alternative. Now you got to be using Gmail or, you know, G Suite accounts. And I am, all three of mine are hosted by Google. And if you're in that world and you just want something that feels a lot leaner and cleaner than mail, and you like things that Gmail does, like multiple labels, and you can even change, I love this feature, you can change the shortcut set MimeStream responds to between Apple Mail and Gmail. And so you can say, you know, I'm used to Command-Shift-D, so mine are set to the mail shortcuts because that's what I'm used to. Or you can use Gmail's kind of shortcut system. And it's great. And it is wildly faster than mail at checking, at archiving. Everything you do, MimeStream seems to do instantly.
Yeah, I've just, as much as I like Apple Mail and View, I mean, boy, that was a loaded statement. I mean, there's things I really like about Apple Mail, like the stability and things, but there's things I really don't like about it. But I've never felt like it was the right solution for Gmail because it's like, you know, the Hatfields and the McCoys, you know, trying to make an email app together. And you just inevitably have problems when there's updates to one or the other. So I'm glad you found a solution. And I used to recommend people just do Gmail on the web because that's really what the environment it's meant for. But this, I've heard so many people speaking highly of this MimeStream, and I don't use any Gmail for my mail, so I don't really have the ability to use it. But I'm glad to hear that it's panning out.
Yeah, it's been a very impressive thing to watch this application kind of spring to life as he's added features. And so, yeah, it's you know, something that we've mentioned before, but if you haven't checked it out in a while and you were kind of waiting to see what it would do, I think it's a great time to check it out again.
Yeah. And the other thing you're doing is you have increased your studio space recently.
Yeah. So we've talked about this on More Power Users, but I've a little more than doubled my studio space at home, and the construction is all done. The final painting is finished. Everything is done. And so I've been slowly working on kind of where things are going to go and preparing the space. You know, when you have just an empty room, you can't really record audio in that room because it sounds really bad. And so I've slowly been just sort of chipping away at a lot of those tasks at, you know, buying some more acoustic foam and getting that figured out. And I bought a desk, and I'm going to end up moving my setup to the new side the new side of the studio. But this is all coinciding with my Kickstarter production. So that closed several weeks ago, and working with printers and everything and getting things in. And so it's also going to be Kickstarter shipping HQ. And so also getting it ready for that. So I'm spending a couple hours a day the last couple of weeks, I feel like, kind of figuring out where things are going to go, making measurements. I got some shelves in and slowly taking shape. It won't be a fully operational Death Star until the Kickstarter shipping is complete. But I'm looking forward to that more and more. I'm really, really excited about it. Really happy I could do it.
If I lived closer to you, I would totally come to your house and Marie Kondo that for you. I would totally put it together.
Well, I did buy some desk accessories the other night that you told me to get. So I'm excited about that too.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I want to hear more about that as you work on it. A couple things in my life is I have refound my love for Swift Playgrounds.
Okay.
Just with the WWDC, it got me thinking again, Swift Playgrounds has really grown into something over the years. And it is kind of a game. It's like a logic game at its most root level. I know even you kind of learn programming along the way, but I've been using it kind of as my little time killer lately. And I just started it over again because I had got pretty far in it at one point, but you forget this stuff. So I've been going through Swift Playgrounds. They've got it on all the platforms, but I've been mainly doing it on my iPad, my phone. But you write little bits of code and then your little guy jumps around and pushes buttons and things, and it's free. I think it's kind of fun in a way to like exercise my brain when I want to have some downtime, but it's also accessible to kids if you got kids in your life. And I just wanted to give a shout out there to Swift Playgrounds if you haven't tried it lately. They also have all these cool modules you can plug into it, but I'm just working my way through. The other thing that happened in my life is my daughter gave me her puppy dog eyes and asked for my clicky keyboard, and I gave it to her because that's what you do when your daughter asks you for anything. So I don't have a clicky keyboard anymore. So I got my Apple keyboard out again, but it's the full size one. It's wireless Bluetooth, but it's the full size keyboard with the number pad. And I just kind of forgot how much I like having a number pad on a keyboard, And the not only is it great for entering numbers and two-factor authentication numbers and doing calculations, but it's also just a great scripting platform. I still love my Stream Deck, but I also like having a bunch of keys on the right side of my keyboard that I can attach to scripts. So I've gone through with Keyboard Maestro, and a lot of my app-specific scripts I've now also attached to buttons on a keypad. For instance, I wrote these cool little Apple scripts that allow me to change the deferred date of an OmniFocus task to 1 day, 2 days, 7 days, whatever. And if I'm in OmniFocus and I just hit 1, the selected task, jumps to a deferred date of tomorrow. And if I'm in Mail, the 1 key puts any personal email in my personal action folder. The 2 key puts any email in my MacSparky action folder, and the 3 key puts an email in my my Sparks Law action folder. So going through Mail, no matter what source it is, and just hitting that 1, 2, or 3 automatically sorts Mail for me. Just I've just been using the keypad more as a scripting launch pad, and it's a pretty smart way to do it.
Yeah, that's clever. That's really clever. Now, is this the one with the Touch ID button, or is it the older one?
I just bought the Touch ID one, man.
There you go.
It just came in. I mean, I was using the iMac Pro one with it for this has been going on for a month or two since I gave the keyboard to my daughter, but when it came out, I said, well, I'm going to try that too. So I guess I should report in on that. Isn't it funny how I get kind of embarrassed sometimes when I spend extra money on my stuff. But yeah, I bought the Touch ID one. I did that. It's kind of weird because I'm so used to it on my laptop. It's super useful for approving things as opposed to watch. I actually find the watch ID or watch unlock faster for sitting down at your Mac and getting started. Because you literally are not doing anything. You just sit down and it unlocks.
Yeah.
Whereas once you enable Touch ID, it defaults to Touch ID. So it's actually a little slower to unlock your Mac. But once you get rolling, having Touch ID is way better than unlocking by double tapping on your watch. And so I think overall it's a win.
Yeah, I bought my wife Mary the compact one. She uses a MacBook Air, but she uses it in clamshell mode with the LG
Yeah.
4K display.
Yeah.
And she has loved it. I mean, a lot of times you upgrade a family member, they're like, "Oh, thanks," but this time she's like, "Yeah, this is awesome," because she never really got the hang of the Apple Watch thing. And I mean, she wears one, but like far as like the double tapping to unlock, and I think she found it frustrating that when she used her laptop, she had Touch ID, except when she
Yeah.
used it at her desk.
Yeah.
And so she's really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the day I can do this on a desktop, because this only works with Apple Silicon Macs. The keyboard will work with an Intel Mac, but the Touch ID requires Apple Silicon.
Yeah, another thing, I'm not sure that I haven't seen it written anywhere, but with that Touch ID button, if you just fully press the button in, it locks the computer. So that's another nice feature. As you're stepping away, you just press one key and your computer locks.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. I think on the new Magic Keyboard with no Touch ID, it used to have an eject button next to F13. Like that's what mine does. Mine has an eject button.
Yeah.
And the new ones have that lock button. So they have brought that even to the keyboards for that work with the Intel Mac. So you can just tap that button and lock your Mac and walk away. And that's fantastic, especially if you're using it in some place like an office or, you know, other people around. Just knowing that you can tap a button and you're all set, and then you can log back in with your watch or Touch ID. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I don't particularly miss the clicky keyboard. I've always been what I call keyboard agnostic. I can type on pretty much anything you stick in front of me. And it's a different feel, but it's fine, and I type fine on it. And but having a number pad, I would recommend if you've got one on your existing computer and you're not fully using it, think about it. Like we had a sponsor today, SetApp. One of the apps there is Better Touch Tool, and one of the things you can do with Better Touch Tool is you can contextually click through automation. Like one of the problems I had was with my SaneBox account. I have I want to save a message to like 2 days. I have like a Sane 2 days folder. So it puts a message and I don't see it for 2 days. But there's really not a way to automate that in Apple Mail, because you can only select up to 9 folders as your favorites that you can use keyboard shortcuts to get into. But you can right click on it and say move to, and then put it into the 2 days folder in the MacSparky account, right? So what I did was I connected those in Better Touch Tool to a keyboard shortcut using the keypad, and then I just programmed in those contextual clicks with Better Touch Tool, and now I can do all my moving of messages, not only to my action folder, but also to those other folders using the keypad, which is pretty convenient. Was that a rabbit hole? Did I go too far down?
That was fantastic. That's what feedback episodes are for sometimes.
All right. Well, there you go. There you go. Maybe I'll write a blog post on some of this. If you guys want me to explain it further, let me know. I'll put a blog post up.
Perfect. This episode of MPU is also made possible by Top 4 from Relay FM. Top 4 is a monthly show about opinions, lists, and loosely held rules. From music to milk, Pringles to woodland creatures, hosts Tiff and Marco Arment can make a top 4 list out of anything. It's going to make you delightfully furious. Top 4 is fantastic. And you can start listening with any episode. You don't need any context. So pick your favorite out of instant coffee, card games, TV couples, Pop-Tart flavors, hot or cold Starbucks drinks. Nothing is off limits for Top 4. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. Just search for Top 4 or go to relay.fm/top4. Have fun.
Well, we are the Mac Power Users. You can find us over at relay.fm/MPU. We love your feedback, as we just proved with this show. Even when you tell us we're dumb, we'll share it, because sometimes we are kind of dumb. We want to thank our sponsors today, and that's the folks over at 1Password, SetApp, and Squarespace. If you want to join in the forums, they're over at talk.macpowerusers.com. And we'll see you next time.